Our platinum sponsors are WSP, 10 More and Associates, Nova, Longitude, M&J Engineering, EXP, and BCC. Our gold sponsors are EAC, Stantec, Highway Studios, and Tetra Tech. And our silver sponsors are Universal Engineering and Digital Drafting Systems. So today we have a technical seminar. Just in case anybody was having trouble joining, I put the link to the Teams meeting. So if anybody wants to send it, you can copy it here quickly and others would be able to join. So I just have a couple of announcements. And then I think we've already covered the sponsor presentation recognition, and then we'll begin with our presentation and speaker. So briefly, we have 2 upcoming events in May. We have the last of our wellness series, which is Leading from Within, and that's scheduled for lunch on May 11th. And then we also have our student scholarship golf tournament, which is our major fundraiser for our student scholarships. That will be held at Crandon Golf on Key Biscayne on May 27th. So we hope that most of you will be able to join us there. And again, those are our sponsors. Just a note about sponsors, it typically runs with the FES calendar. So sometime in July or early August, we'll be sending out our next request for annual sponsors. So if you all could keep a lookout for that, I would appreciate that. And that will help the incoming board in terms of having funds available to put on programs for members in 2022 and 2023. So let me introduce our speaker. Our topic today is design build, managing risks between the contractor and engineer. So Mr. Paul Bough manages consulting engagements involving construction litigation support, construction delay claims analysis and preparation, defective construction investigations and calculation of resultant damages. He also provides expert witness in mediation, arbitration, and litigation. He's a graduate of Purdue University and began his career over 30 years ago with Westinghouse Elevator Company. He's a certified general contractor licensed in the state of Florida, and he has extensive program and project management experience on a wide range of transportation, building, industrial, and municipal projects. His program management experience includes sports and performing arts venues, including the Adrian R. Center here in Miami-Dade County, and he's also overseen the completion of the Orlando Amway Center Arena, the home of the Orlando Magic, and the Dr. Phillips Center for Performing Arts. And I've worked with Paul many, many years ago. I know on bond engineering services for the port, so we're former colleagues as well. Anyway, thank you, Paul, very much for joining us today and agreeing to present this topic for our group. So whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Okay, I think I've got it working. You can see
Yes.
my opening slide, correct?
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. So thank you for the introduction, Joanne. My name is Paul Bough again. I'm with Berkley Research Group, also known as BRG. We provide consulting services on problem construction projects and on construction litigation cases. This presentation is on managing risks between the contractor and the designer on design build projects. I'm sure you're all involved in design build projects. Design build has been used as a delivery system forever, but began to gain steam with public entities in the 1990s. The Design Build Institute of America was founded in 1993, and at that time, only 3 states had statutes that allowed design build on public projects. While it's generally a very good delivery system for owners, designers are exposed to much more risk than under traditional design bid build arrangements. In recent years, my firm has seen a trend towards contractors suing design partners on design build projects. So that prompted this presentation. Now, let's see. My slides are not advancing, and I'm going to try to figure out why here.
I think if you click your mouse, it should advance to the next slide.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm an associate director with Berkley. As Joanne mentioned, I'm a Purdue construction management grad, and I'm a certified general contractor here in Florida. I've worked on rapid transit projects, public venues, including the Adrian Arce Center and the Miami Marlins ballpark. I've worked on commercial construction matters, heavy civil projects, and multifamily residential. I've served as a project manager and an owner's rep on many projects, and I've spent a good portion of my career in construction claims, where I analyze delay issues and defective construction issues, and I testify as an expert. Just a little bit about BRG. It's a national and international consulting firm that specializes in dispute resolution and dispute analysis, provides expert testimony services in a number of industries, including construction. We have offices around the country, including 4 in Florida, in Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and Pensacola. So I'll start with a quick refresher on construction delivery options. Design bid build is shown on the left, which is the traditional delivery method. This is followed by construction manager at risk, followed by lump sum design build, progressive design build, and then public-private partnerships, or P3s. Progressive design build is a twist on traditional design build, whereby the owner participates in reviews of the design and construction budget at each stage of design. This allows the owner to make material, equipment, and design decisions during the design cycle based on costing provided by the contractor. A GMP is established based on the design that the owner has agreed to. This helps to avoid change orders and construction issues during construction. Public-private partnerships, or P3s, encompass design build, but a concessionaire or a consortium agrees to finance the project in exchange for a revenue stream once the project is completed. Revenue streams typically come from tolls, rents, or usage fees. The concessionaire then operates the facility for a defined number of years before it is turned back over to the owner. So what do public owners want out of design, build, or P3 projects? Owners want a simple delivery system that places all the design risk and construction risk with the design builder. They want a single point of contact, point of responsibility, single point of contact. They want their projects to be on time and on budget. And they want the design builder to be on the hook for most design issues, construction issues, delays, and cost overruns. So some of the basics of design build are on this slide. Design build projects are typically contractor led because they have the money with which to finance design build and P3 pursuits. Most design firms don't have large cash reserves and therefore cannot finance these pursuits and be the lead entity on these pursuits. Typically, an upfront teaming agreements are created between a contractor and a designer during the pursuit. These agreements define who will do what and how much each entity will contribute. During a pursuit, the design build team takes the owner's design criteria and our schematic design and develops it into a preliminary design that can be priced. Part of the process is performing a risk analyses and determining adequate contingencies, and I'll talk more about that later. If a pursuit is successful, a series of contracts have to be created between the owner and design builder, between the design builder and the designers, and between the design builder and the subcontractors. Construction begins, and then you have the typical scope changes, cost overruns, and delays, and the contractor has to find someone to blame. That is typically you, the designers. So regarding the basics of public-private partnerships, as I indicated, P3s also involve design build, but on P3s, there's a financing and revenue component that the P3 concessionaire controls. And they also control the operation and maintenance of the completed facility or project. So on a typical P3 project, the process involves an RFQ and then an RFP. There is such thing as an unsolicited P3 proposal, but I'm not going to get into that today. The owner contracts with the winning concessionaire. The concessionaire contracts with the design build entity, and the design build entity contracts with designers and subcontractors. The design and construction phases under P3 are essentially identical to that under a design build contract. The difference being that on completion, the consortium or concessionaire operates the facility, collects the tolls or rents, and turns it over to the owner after a set period of time. So looking at traditional risks under design bid build, these are the key factors of the designer's risks. There is a standard of care provided that is consistent with professional skill and care. The owner provides an implied warranty. This is known as the Spearin Doctrine after a lawsuit from many years ago. This essentially says that since the owner contracted for the design of a project and assigned to a contractor to build, any costs to fix design errors or omissions become the liability of the owner. That said, I'm sure you're all aware that an owner can turn around and sue its designer if the owner feels the professional standard of care was breached. So under design build, the design risks are different. The owner holds little risk, except for unforeseen conditions such as geotechnical or environmental issues or for owner changes. This situation creates an elevated standard of care for design builders. And public owners are now writing design build contracts that spell out the design builder's responsibilities for risks that go substantially beyond the typical standard of care requirements. In addition, the contractor arms of design build entities are going after their designers for quantity risks associated with their pricing proposals. So the typical standard of care language refers to reasonable and ordinary care and consistent with professional skill and care that complies with practical standards. So these traditional clauses would take into account the fact that we all know that there's no such thing as a error-free or perfect design. Additional traditional language also refers to engineering principles generally accepted as standards in the industry in the state where the project is located. They also often refer to the skill and care commensurate with that provided by other designers for similar projects. So unfortunately, with design build, we can throw all that out the window. You're looking at elevated standard of care trends under design build. These trends are mostly seen on heavy civil projects, but their use is expanding. Under design build, design is to be free of defects. The designer is liable for both negligent and non-negligent errors and omissions. These non-negligent errors and omissions are generally non-insurable, which creates a big problem. Designers' responsibility for quantity and cost variances are also generally non-insurable. Just as an aside, if you're wondering what what a non-negligent error is. It's generally an error arising from an issue that was not foreseeable. An example might be an unexpected code interpretation by a building official. So these next several slides, I have some examples of elevated standards of care that we are seeing in design build contracts. This one is from a Texas DOT contract. The design builder is required to indemnify TxDOT for all errors, inconsistencies, or other defects in the design. This is a much higher standard of care, obviously. Another example from TxDOT. This is a warranty clause. The project shall be free of defects, including design errors. All the design risk is on the design builder, and if that ends up taking money out of the contractor's pocket, who are they going to come after? You, the designers. Another example is on this slide from a warranty clause, free of all defects and deficiencies. So the standard under design build is that the design has to be perfect. And one more example from a design build contract. In this clause, the owner wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the ordinary standard of care was out the window. Contractor holds sole responsibility, regardless of the ordinary standard of care, for design and construction free from all defects, including any portions provided by subconsultants, subcontractors, and suppliers. So, as I've said, your standard of care on design build is perfection. So I mentioned pricing risks. Design build proposals are based on estimates prepared from a preliminary design. We know some things are going to change, yet the proposal price is based on the preliminary design. The only way to offset the pricing risk is through contingencies. But how are contingencies developed? Do you throw 20% to cover unknown costs and then cut it to 10% so you'll be sure and get the job? Or is there a deliberate process that looks at all known pricing risks and assigns a value to those risks? I'll talk about that some more in a minute, but I want to show some example of contract clauses between design build contractors and designers that are shifting quantity risks onto the designers. This one talks about preliminary design in sufficient detail for contractor to prepare the proposal and develop the project price. So if there are cost overruns, the contractor can claim that the preliminary design was insufficient. I think I skipped a slide here. Here we go. Some more examples of this. Preliminary design sufficient to enable the parties to prepare construction and operational cost estimates. So in the case of a P3, which which is where this comes from. The contractor can go after the designer if the operational costs face overruns. The second clause says, support the contractor in estimating the scope and quantities so the contractor can submit an accurate, high-quality estimate. These clauses are all designed to give the contractor ammunition against the designer should cost overruns occur. This next one is my favorite. These are all from real contracts, by the way. The first sentence says that the contractor is responsible for developing the ceiling or lump sum price and is responsible for cost estimates. Perfect. This should be in all design contracts on design build projects. Second sentence, also very good. Designer does not guarantee that the design can be constructed within the preliminary estimate, the ceiling, or the lump sum price. Also perfect. This should be in all design contracts on design build projects. Now the last sentence in blue. Notwithstanding the previous two sentences, the designer is liable to the contractor for cost overruns. How did this manage to stay in this agreement? I don't know, but clearly it negates what was trying to be created in the first two sentences. So I've talked a little bit about contingencies. How are design build projects going to protect themselves against cost overruns? Contingencies are the best tool to provide protection against the cost of design errors. It's typical to establish both design and construction contingencies, but there must be rules established regarding how those funds can be accessed. Will the use of funds solely be up to the contractor? Does the designer have control over the design contingency? All these things need to be worked out between the parties. So how best should contingencies be developed? As I mentioned, it's not unheard of for a team to throw a number, it's 20% at a project and say, we think that's adequate. But that's not adequate. A risk assessment process should be employed on all design build projects, along with the creation of a risk register, which is what this is on this slide. The risk register is used to define risks, looking at every aspect of the project to determine where the risks occur, estimate the level of risk, and assign a dollar value to that risk. The process should involve identifying all known risks, design, geotechnical, environmental, price escalation risks, subcontracting risks, constructability risks, etc. So the conclusions here is that elevated design risk is being imposed on designers via definition of standard of care through indemnity provisions and through warranty obligations. These risks need to be looked at carefully. Designers should also use caution when accepting contract language that ties their preliminary design to the quantities and pricing utilized by the contractor in establishing its bid. So some recommendations are to avoid contract clauses that shift quantity or estimate risks to the designer. I recommend a vigorous risk assessment process that identifies adequate contingencies for both design and construction. I recommend that rules be established regarding how the contingency can be accessed and used. Also, I think it's wise for designers to look at project-specific insurance coverage and excess loss coverage, and also within contracts to look at clauses that would place a cap on liability for errors and omissions. So with that, I will open it up for any discussions or questions.
So if anyone has a question, either raise your hand or type your question into the chat, and then we can all read it and Paul can respond. So I think Carmine Borea has a question. So go ahead, Carmine.
Yes, thanks, Paul. I have a question on the contingency. If you can elaborate a little bit more on how define the contingency and what are the parameters that you think have to be taken in consideration, and also if you can elaborate on the rules for access to the contingency. Thanks.
Well, I think the establishment of contingencies is always going to be a bit of a battle between the design group and the construction group. The tendency is to keep the contingency low enough to cover risks, but keep it high enough to cover risks, but keep it low enough so that you'll be successful in the pursuit and you'll win the contract. So there's a balancing act. But I think it's important that a group of people work together on the risk assessment, people from the design side and from the construction side, and the process should involve identifying every single risk that can be identified, whether it be a quantity with risks or possibly a geotechnical risk or a risk with a subcontractor that we don't know how well is going to perform. And then the process is, okay, worst case scenario, if this goes the wrong way, what's it going to cost? So you can come up with a number. The process also involves looking at the relative risk factor. Is it a high risk? Is it a low risk? Is it a medium risk? And you can discount the cost that you're assigning based on whether you think this is highly probable or not so probable. So once that process has gone through and fully vetted, you can come up with a number that would represent a reasonable contingency. And it can be split into both construction contingencies that would involve contractor issues and design issues that would involve design issues. And I think the best way is that the designer controls the design contingency and the contractor controls the construction contingency. But I've seen arrangements where the contractor has the upper hand and they get to make the decisions, and that hasn't worked out that well. So I think it's basically setting accurate contingency values and then determining rules that will work for everybody on how that those funds can be accessed.
Right, thank you. I have a question from, I think, Alvaro Hernandez, and it's this. It says, have you seen three-way DB agreements, i.e. the contractor and the owner, the designer and the owner, and teaming agreements between designer and contractor?
Yeah, teaming agreements are common. I've seen some litigation matters where they're not necessarily enforceable, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it's typical for a teaming agreement to go into place, which covers the period between the start of pursuit and the award of the contract. Now, the agreements, there can be a joint venture agreement between the design build contractor and the design firm, but it's not always done that way. Sometimes there's a joint venture agreement, and sometimes the general contractor is just the lead, and they hire a designer just like they would a subcontractor. So there's different contractual arrangements on different projects. In the case where there is a joint venture, there still can be this becomes a joint venture entity, but then the joint venture entity then hires the designer. So there's typically always going to be a design contract that spells out the obligations and risks of the designer.
I guess I have just to follow up on that question, is there an ideal contractual arrangement for design build or P3 projects?
The short answer is no. I believe the Design Build Institute of America has done a good job of creating contract forms for design build projects. But I've been involved in projects where they didn't fit well, and it was necessary to adjust those contracts.
Okay. So there's a follow-on question, and maybe this relates to the last one I just asked. Is there a standard type contract for DB projects between contractor and designer that you would recommend?
Is there a standard? What
A
was the question?
contract for design build projects between the contractor and designer that you would recommend?
Oh, I would say your first stop should be looking at the Design Build Institute of America forms.
Okay. We have another question from Tan Do. It says, does the ordinary standard of care, such as stated in the excerpts, apply to the pre-bid phase? And is there a modification needed because of the preliminary nature of this phase?
I would say no. You're in a design build pursuit, so you know that the owner's expectations are no design issues, no defects, no design issues. So I would say from the pursuit phase onward, you're looking at a situation where these higher standard of care requirements are in play.
Okay. I don't think we have any more questions. So with that, we can wrap up. ending a little bit early. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Paul. I hope this was informative for everyone. Oh, wait. Okay. Yes, Daniel, we will provide a copy of the presentation. We will get that and post it on the website, or just we'll probably distribute it to all of the registered attendees, most likely. So going once, going twice. Any other questions or comments?
Joanne, we have one more from Ariano has raised his hand.
Oh, I see.
Go ahead, Ariano. Adriano, I'm sorry.
You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was going to type it. Do you have any statistics as far as the most frequent errors in what percent they represent on the cost of the projects? So any statistics on these errors and contingencies and omissions that you may have database of that?
That's a good question, and unfortunately, I don't have any information on that at hand. There's probably been some studies done. It's going to differ based on the type of project, highway versus underground utility, et cetera. And I think there probably are studies out there that would give some guidance in those areas, but I'm not immediately aware of where to find them other than Google.
Thank you.
Oh, I think with that, we don't have any more questions. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, thank you to Mr. Bough for facilitating this presentation, and look forward to seeing all of you, or some of you hopefully, on May 27th at the golf tournament in Key Biscayne. So thank you everyone and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.